It was a warm evening when everything changed. The sun was just beginning to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of pink and orange. I remember it like it was yesterday sitting in the back seat of our old car, my small hands clutching my stuffed rabbit tightly. My mother and father were in the front, but their faces were unreadable, distant even. The road we were on was familiar, one we had traveled countless times, always heading to Grandma's house. I loved those visits. Grandma's house smelled of lavender and freshly baked cookies, and she always had the time to listen to my endless chatter. But tonight felt different. There was an undeniable tension in the air, thick and suffocating. As we neared Grandma's house, something in my mother's demeanor shifted. She turned in her seat to face me, her expression tight, like she was bracing herself for something. "We just need some time to figure things out," she said softly, her eyes not meeting mine. Her voice was too calm, too rehearsed. "Be good for Grandma, okay?" The words hit me like a cold wave. They didn't make sense. Why would they need time? I hadn't done anything wrong. I loved Grandma. Grandma loved me. I didn't understand, but I nodded anyway, my small heart racing with confusion. No explanation, no goodbye hugs, just those words, spoken so carefully, as if they were a script she had rehearsed in her head 1,000 times. It was as if she knew exactly what was about to happen, and that knowledge left me with a sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach. The car pulled into the driveway, and there stood Grandma, waiting at the front door with her usual warm smile. But this time, something in her eyes told me that she already knew. She reached out and pulled me into her arms, a tight embrace that felt both comforting and hollow at the same time. I barely registered it. My parents' car was already backing out of the driveway. I took a step forward, my voice rising in panic. "Wait!" I called out, desperate, as I expected my mother to roll down the window, to tell me it was all a mistake, that everything was fine, that they were just leaving for a little while and would come back soon. But the car didn't stop. It didn't even slow down. It turned onto the road, and within seconds it was gone. I stood frozen in the driveway, my heart pounding in my chest. The world around me felt like it was closing in, and the reality of what was happening hit me like a wave crashing over a shore. They were leaving, and they weren't coming back. I wanted to run after them, to scream, to beg them to stay. But Grandma's arms were around me now, and despite the warmth they offered, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had just been abandoned. The world, once so certain, felt foreign and cold. The days that followed felt like a blur, as if the world had shifted into a slower, quieter rhythm. Life with Grandma Margaret was nothing like the chaos I had known before. The first few nights, I would lie in her guest room, the weight of the silence pressing in on me. My parents were gone, and I didn't know if they would ever come back. I wanted to scream, to shout at the walls, but all I could do was lay there in the stillness, my mind racing. Grandma's house, though small, was a place of steady calm. The smell of her old books, mixed with the faint scent of lavender, filled every room. She lived modestly in an aging house with a creaky front door, a garden that seemed to thrive despite being neglected, and a kitchen that always smelled of something baking. But the house was full of her love. Even in the quiet, I could feel it, and yet there was something inside me that couldn't shake the feeling of abandonment. I tried to pretend it didn't matter. After all, Grandma was here, and she was enough, wasn't she? But every night, when I crawled into bed, the tears would start to fall before I could stop them. I missed my parents. I missed the sound of their voices, the feeling of being part of a family. But now, that part of me felt lost, like a distant dream I couldn't quite reach. Grandma Margaret, though, never let me drown in my sadness. She had a way of making everything seem manageable, as if nothing could break the stillness of her world. Every morning, she would wake up early, her quiet footsteps stirring me awake as she made her coffee. I would watch her from the kitchen doorway, her silver hair neatly pulled back, her eyes thoughtful as she scanned the pages of the newspaper. There was a certain calmness to the way she moved, a serenity that seemed impossible in the chaos I felt inside. She was always steady, always present. Every time I felt my heart threaten to break, she would sit beside me, stroke my hair, and whisper words of reassurance. Some people aren't ready to be parents, darling. But that's not your fault, she would say softly, her voice a gentle balm. I wanted to believe her. I truly did. But how could it not be my fault? How could it be anything but my fault if my parents left me behind? The days turned into weeks, and Grandma never wavered. She hired tutors to help me with my studies when I struggled, never once letting me feel like I was anything less than capable. It was as if she had an endless well of patience, a kind of quiet strength that I could never quite understand but deeply admired. And as time passed, I began to believe in something again. I began to believe in myself, in the possibility of a future that didn't involve waiting for something that would never come. Grandma's belief in me became the foundation of my own, and I started to build something new, something better than the broken pieces of my past. But one thing became clear. I would never need to wait by the window again. I didn't need them to come back. Grandma Margaret had shown me what it meant to have family, to be part of something real. And that was enough. It would have to be. It happened so suddenly. One afternoon, as I sat in the quiet of Grandma Margaret's living room working through a stack of schoolwork, my phone buzzed on the coffee table. I wasn't expecting any call, certainly not one that would change everything. When I saw the caller ID, my heart stopped. It was the hospital. The moment I answered, I knew. The voice on the other end, so calm, so detached, said the words that hit me like a punch to the chest. I'm so sorry, but your grandmother has passed. It was a heart attack. It was quick. My mind couldn't comprehend it at first. I had just spoken to her this morning. Her usual soft humming had filled the house as she made breakfast, and I had just kissed her goodbye before heading out to school. It felt impossible that she could be gone just like that. She was always the strong one, the one who held everything together, and now she was gone. Just gone. I don't even remember how I got to the hospital. My legs moved mechanically, my heart numb as I walked through the sterile hallways. The world felt like it was spinning in slow motion, the walls closing in on me. I couldn't understand how someone so constant, so unwavering, could be erased from existence so quickly. She had been the one person I could always count on. And now I was alone. I stood at the entrance to her room, not wanting to go in, but knowing I had to. The scene before me was surreal. The doctors and nurses were finishing their rounds, their voices muffled by the ringing in my ears. I stepped inside, and it hit me like a freight train. Grandma Margaret wasn't lying there, sitting in her favorite armchair, reading a book with her usual serene smile. She was gone. And that finality tore through me. The funeral was the next blur. People were kind, offering condolences that felt like hollow echoes. They said all the right things, but the only thing I could hear was the deafening silence of the house that now felt empty without her. I gripped the tiny gold key around my neck, her last gift to me, the last thing she had given me before her sudden departure. It felt so much heavier now, like it was holding the weight of everything I was now responsible for. As the ceremony ended, I felt a strange sense of detachment. The grief, though immense, didn't feel like it was mine to carry. And then, as if the universe was testing me, they walked in. After 10 years of silence, they came into my life as if nothing had changed. They looked older, their faces worn with time, but those eyes were the same. I froze. My breath caught in my throat as they approached me with an almost practiced sorrow. I hadn't expected them to come. The rage inside me swelled, but there was no time for it. Not yet. Sweetheart, my mother murmured, reaching out to me. We're so sorry about Grandma. I pulled away instinctively. The words I had imagined saying to them, the questions I had rehearsed for years, seemed lost in the air. They had come back for a reason, but I couldn't bring myself to ask yet. It wasn't about them, not anymore. But then came the shock. It wasn't their grief that mattered. It was the look in their eyes, something cold and calculating. They weren't here for me. They weren't here to comfort me. They were here for the one thing they had always wanted. The inheritance. The realization hit me like a sharp slap to the face. They hadn't come back for me. They had come back for what Grandma had left behind. They had come for the wealth. My heart burned with anger as I felt my grip tighten around the necklace Grandma had given me. This wasn't about love. It was never about love. I took a deep breath. This was just the beginning. Grandma had prepared me for this moment, even if I hadn't known it at the time. I wasn't alone, not anymore. The next few days felt like a battle I hadn't signed up for. My parents' return was nothing short of a storm. They hovered, pretending to care, asking how I was holding up, but I could see right through them. The look in their eyes, the greed, the desperation was unmistakable. It wasn't grief they felt for Grandma Margaret. No, it was the cold, calculating desire to lay claim to what she had left behind. I could feel their intentions in every word they spoke, every gesture they made. They weren't here for me. They were here for her money. I tried to push them out of my mind, focusing instead on the tasks at hand. But when Michael Harrison, Grandma's attorney, called the next morning, I knew something big was about to happen. My pulse quickened as I walked into the living room. There, seated at the coffee table, was a thick stack of documentary will. The weight of it was overwhelming, its presence like an undeniable reality crashing into the fragile space we had been living in. This was real. Grandma was gone, and everything she left behind was now in my hands. I sat down, feeling the cold press of uncertainty crawl up my spine. Michael's calm voice sliced through the tension, his words clear and deliberate as he began reading from the will. My parents sat across from me, their faces unreadable, eyes glued to the lawyer, though I could see the barely contained anticipation behind their stoic expressions. I knew they were waiting for the inevitable slip-up, a mistake, something they could use to claim their share of the wealth they thought was rightfully theirs. But they hadn't counted on Grandma's foresight. Michael Harrison glanced at me, then back at the papers, before beginning. To my beloved granddaughter, Emily Grace Montgomery, I leave my entire estate, including all properties, investments, bank accounts, and business holdings, currently valued at approximately $47 million. The words struck like a hammer, each syllable echoing in the room. My parents' faces faltered for just a moment before they quickly masked their shock with thin smiles. They weren't prepared for this. They never thought Grandma would leave everything to me, her abandoned granddaughter, as they had once seen me. What? My mother's voice trembled as she shot to her feet, her face going pale. This is impossible. She was just a retired teacher. My father, equally stunned, stood up too, knocking his chair back. This doesn't make any sense. We're her children. We should have a right to this. Michael's calm voice rose over their outbursts. The will is clear. Rose Montgomery made it her mission to ensure that her wealth was kept out of the wrong hands. She wanted to protect Emily from those who tried to take advantage of her. This is not a mistake. The room seemed to close in around us as I felt the tension climb higher. My mother, now visibly furious, reached for the papers. This is a manipulation. She didn't know what she was doing. You'll see. We'll contest this. Michael, unflinching, slid another document across the table. Here's the legal abandonment papers your signatures were on, acknowledging that you voluntarily gave up your rights to Emily when you left her in Rose's care 10 years ago. You didn't contest the summons. The court granted Rose full custody. My hands shook as I watched them struggle for control. The horror in their eyes was unmistakable, but not because they were grieving. No, it was because the truth was out in the open. They had tried to steal from Grandma, and they had failed. Their anger wasn't at the loss of a mother, it was at the loss of control. They had lost everything. I swallowed hard, my throat tight, as I absorbed the weight of it all. I wanted to scream, to lash out, but the truth hung heavy in the air, undeniable and final. This was no longer about them. It never had been. As I looked at the lawyer, then at my parents, I could feel the shift. This was my inheritance. This was my future. And they could never take that away from me. The days after the reading of Grandma Margaret's will passed in a whirlwind. The air around me was thick with tension as my parents refused to let go. They stormed into my life with their familiar demands, insisting on contesting the will, claiming that they were the rightful heirs, not me. I tried to ignore them, but their presence loomed over everything like a shadow, and the weight of their rejection threatened to crush me. But with every attempt they made to wrestle control from me, I felt something inside me grow stronger. I could feel the walls closing in, but I refused to back down. Grandma Margaret had never given up on me, not once, even when it would have been easier to. She believed in me, even when no one else did. And now I would honor that belief. This wasn't just about money, it was about preserving everything she had built, everything she had fought for, and carrying her legacy forward. It wasn't long before they tried their final desperate move. The knock on my office door was sharp, almost urgent, and when I opened it, there they were, me parents, once again. But this time, it was different. They weren't just coming to plead or to beg for their share. No, now they were coming to destroy. "We won't let you get away with this," my father said, his voice tight with barely contained rage. His eyes flickered with something else, something darker than I had ever seen in him before. "We will take this to the media. We'll tell the world that you're a spoiled child stealing from your own parents." The words hit me like a slap. They weren't just threatening me anymore. They were threatening everything that Grandma had worked for. I could feel my hands tremble, my anger rising in my chest, but I held it back. I wasn't going to let them win. Not this time. I had spent too many years waiting, wondering why they had left me, wondering if I wasn't enough. But now, I was done wondering. I was done being the scared little girl. "Go ahead," I said, my voice steady despite the rage bubbling inside me. "Tell them. Tell the world how you abandoned me, how you signed away your rights to me, how you walked out when I needed you most. See how far that gets you." The room went silent. My parents' expressions faltered, and for the first time I saw fear in their eyes. Fear not of losing money, but of losing the last shred of control they had over me. They hadn't expected me to stand up to them. They hadn't expected me to fight back. "Do you really think the world will care about your story?" I continued, stepping closer, my voice low and firm. "You didn't raise me, Grandma did. She showed me what it meant to stand on my own 2 feet, to make something of myself without relying on anyone. And I'll make sure her legacy lives on without you." My mother opened her mouth, but the words caught in her throat. My father's hands clenched into fists, but he didn't move. They had no argument left, no justification. It was all out in the open now, and they knew it. They couldn't take away what Grandma had left me, not her money, not her legacy, and certainly not the love she had shown me when they hadn't. I stood tall, feeling the weight of the gold key around my neck, Grandma's final gift to me. It wasn't just a necklace. It was a symbol of everything I had inherited from her strength, her wisdom, and her belief in me, and I wasn't going to let them take that away. The silence between us stretched, and then, without a word, they turned and walked out, their plans crumbling in the face of truth. For the first time in my life, I felt the weight lift from my shoulders. I wasn't just Emily anymore. I wasn't the girl left behind. I was a Montgomery. And I was ready to build something far greater than they could ever understand. The days after my parents walked out of my life again felt like a strange mix of relief and unease. The house was quieter now, but it was also mine, truly mine. The weight of responsibility settled on my shoulders, heavier than I had ever imagined, but I wasn't afraid. Grandma Margaret had prepared me for this, even if I hadn't known it at the time. Her legacy was no longer just about the fortune she left behind. It was about the values she instilled in me, the belief that I could do better, that I could rise above the darkness that had always threatened to swallow me. The hardest part was still to come, though. The house, the investments, the foundation she'd built, all of it was now in my hands. I had to learn how to carry the torch, not just for myself, but for everyone who depended on what Grandma had worked so hard to create. The pressure was suffocating, and sometimes I wondered if I was really ready. But then I'd feel the smooth edges of the small gold key around my neck, a tangible reminder of what she had entrusted to me. One late afternoon, as I sat in my new office room that had once belonged to Grandma, pulled out the small velvet box she had given me all those years ago, the one with the tiny key. The key was more than just a piece of jewelry. It had always felt like a puzzle waiting to be solved, a mystery she had left for me to unravel. I turned it over in my fingers, the metal cool against my skin, and for the first time I felt the gravity of the moment. Grandma had known. She had known all along that this day would come, that I would be the one to carry on her work. But she had also known that I needed to be ready, and that key was her way of making sure I was. It was then that I remembered what she had said during the party after I won the science fair. "You're only just beginning, my dear. You'll do great things." I had believed her then, but now, sitting in the room she had once sat in, the weight of her words felt real. She had set me up for this, not just the wealth, but the responsibility, the challenge. That night, I sat in front of her old desk, the key in my hand, staring at the papers before decisions to be made, directions to take. I had already decided that I wouldn't just sit on the money. I wouldn't be the kind of person who hoarded what Grandma had worked for. I would use it, every last penny, to make the world better. I would build something lasting, something that would make her proud. As I looked out the window, the last of the sunlight fading from the sky, I felt a strange peace settle inside me. The legacy Grandma had left wasn't just about the financial security, it was about the opportunity to make a difference. And I was ready. The key. That simple, unassuming key had unlocked something far greater than I could have ever imagined. It was the key to my future, to the future of the people I could help, and to the life I was about to build. Grandma had given me the strength to carry on. Now it was my turn to prove that I could make a difference. And I would, for her, for me, and for the world she believed in.